I'm getting a lot of interesting feedback on my recent NT1100 or Africa Twin video, particularly in relation to my own NC750X. Some say I might even regret swapping the NC750X for the NT1100. So today I thought I might just do a little comparison to see how different or similar the two bikes might be. I'm most curious about riding position, wind protection and ergonomics. I'll also look at weight distribution and luggage and how each bike's handling dynamics might compare. If this sounds like something that might interest you, that's coming up right now. Let's start by looking at both bikes head-on. On the left is the NT1100 and on the right is my 2020 model NC750X. I'm using that model because it's the one I own and the one I'd be upgrading from. If you're considering the new 2021 model NC750X, this video is still a good reference as proportionally they are very similar. Although the new 2021 model will sit a little lower due to its reduced suspension height. The first thing that's strikingly obvious is the difference in overall widths of the bikes. The new NT1100 is a lot wider, which is surprising when you consider it's not a lot heavier than the 2020 NC750X. The manual NT1100 weighs in at 238 kilograms fully fueled and ready to ride, and my manual NC750X weighs in at 220 kilograms ready to ride. In the case of the NT1100, that's only 18 kilograms more for a motorcycle that is larger in size and has a much larger engine, but the comparative weight figures don't tell the whole story. More on that later. Looking at the bodywork and screens, we can see there is going to be a lot more protection from the elements on the NT1100, with a wider touring screen and additional wind deflectors. Although screen height-wise, there's not a lot of difference between the two bikes. The NT1100 screen is 5-way adjustable for height and angle. The NC750X's screen is not adjustable at all. Seeing them so similarly positioned in height, I'm really hoping the NT1100 screen can be adjusted high enough to give good protection to someone my size, 6'1". Another factor to consider here is seat heights. If the NT1100 seat sits lower in the frame than my NC750X, then that will enhance the NT1100's effectiveness. We'll compare seating in a moment. Fitted with panniers, the NT1100 looks almost twice as wide as the NC750X. Noticeably wider too are the handlebars, and we can also see they sit a little higher on the NC750X. Again suggesting the NT1100 rider will have a little more weight on their wrists rather than sitting upright, which I personally don't mind. At this point I really want to see the NT1100 screen in its highest position. I hope we get to see that soon. We've compared weight, now let's compare horsepower and torque. The NT1100 produces 100 horsepower at 7,500 RPM, and the 2020 NC750X produces 54 horsepower at 6,250 RPM. That's almost twice as much power for the NT1100, with not a lot more weight. I find the current power level of the NC750X to be quite satisfactory, so I am expecting to feel a real seat-of-the-pants difference here. Let's check torque. 77 foot-pound at 6,250 RPM versus 51 foot-pound at 4,750 RPM. Now that's interesting. That's only 1.5 times more powerful for the NT1100 when it comes to torque, and the NC750X hits peak torque 1500 RPM earlier in the rev range and is 18 kilograms lighter. Although I will feel a torque difference, the greater horsepower difference tells me I'm going to notice the NT1100's acceleration more at higher speeds. This will be very useful for passing cars on the freeway, and the NT1100's much greater horsepower should also make two-up touring more effortless. Now let's overlay the NT1100 and NC750X to compare the rider triangles. Straight off the bat, we can see how similar the bike profiles are. They are very close in overall proportions, especially from the side. Actually, I just had a thought. I wonder if we're not getting the new NC750X here because Honda Australia knew the NT1100 was on its way. Looking at them overlaid like this, it does appear the two models have very similar intentions. Why buy a new NC750X when you can own an NT1100, especially when you consider the distances Australians tend to travel? Very interesting. Looking at the seat heights, the NT1100 is only slightly lower in the seat and the screen heights are pretty even. Geometry-wise, the NT1100 is a whisker shorter in the wheelbase, but they're both very similar. When it comes to turning and direction changes, the NT1100 should feel very similar to the NC750X, although I believe it might not be as quick to react due to the differing centres of gravity. Let's look at that now. You see, the NC750X has a very clever way of disguising its true weight. By laying the engine down and moving the fuel tank to its under-seat position, the NC750X carries its weight much lower and as such feels lighter to pick up off the stand. It'll be a different situation for the NT1100 however. You can see the NT1100's parallel twin engine stands more upright in the frame, and above that higher still is the fuel tank, and in the case of the NT1100, that fuel load weighs 15 kilograms. Overlaying the NC750X's tank and engine location, we see how much lower that mass is carried. I'm predicting the NT1100 will feel noticeably heavier to pick up off the stand than the NC750X, and this may even translate to a little more top-heavy feel in low-speed manoeuvring and handling. Something else to note is the foot peg location. The foot pegs are a little lower in relation to the seat on the NT1100 and noticeably more forward than the NC750X. This should provide for a more relaxed posture on board the NT1100, again signifying its touring intentions. The next item I want to look at is luggage capacity. If fitted with panniers, it's clear the NT1100 will certainly have more storage available, but the big question for me is, will the panniers take a full-size helmet? This is a big benefit of the NC750X's luggage system and something I would definitely miss. The panniers look very slim from front view, which is great for inner city riding, and I initially thought there was no way I'd be getting helmets in there. But the picture tells a different story when you see them from the back. All of a sudden they look quite deep, and I reckon there's a 50-50 chance a full-face helmet might fit. We're expecting to see the NT1100 on display in a few weeks at the upcoming EICMA show in Milan, opening to the press on the 23rd of November, so I expect to see lots of great videos coming from there. I won't be going sadly, but I am expecting to see quite a few reports coming from the show and will be eagerly awaiting every bit of news, especially of the NT1100. Now that I've pretty much covered the key areas of interest for me, what is my conclusion? Should I upgrade or stay with the NC750X as others are suggesting? Well, if I could have more than one bike, I'd definitely keep the NC750X as my everyday runaround bike, buy a tourer, and I'd also buy a cruiser. If my wife's watching, that's it, I promise I'd only have 3 bikes. But I'm not in a position to do that just yet, so it's just one bike at a time for me. But which bike? I would like more weather protection in winter, a quieter helmet on the highway, more seat comfort, better pillion accommodations, a little more luxury, and I'm really interested in seeing what it's like to live with a DCT gearbox. So at the moment, I'm set on upgrading to the NT1100. I was strongly considering the Africa Twin, but after the feedback you guys gave me, I think I'll be better off on the NT1100. And if we're talking colours, it might even be black, just like my NC750X. Oh, and on that cruiser I just mentioned, there is one cruiser out there I'd buy in a heartbeat if the means became available, and it may not be the bike you're thinking of. I might explain why and make that the topic of my next video if you're interested. Thanks for joining me again today, guys. Here are a few more videos you might enjoy. Bye for now.